Today I'll speak on the concept of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a social and a philanthropic organization whose primary aim is to make good men better and strive for self-development. There are too many different notions about Freemasonry which I want to clarify. The principles of Freemasonry are based on brotherly love, relief and truth. And integrity is the core value on which Freemasonry sustains itself. We in Nagpur, the Freemasons of Nagpur, are governed by the Grand Lodge of India, which is an independent organization based in Delhi. And in India, we have 4 regions, the North, South, East and West, which has about at least more than 25,000 Freemasons. The other purpose, as I've said, is a philanthropic organization. It has one of the highest charities in the world. But we do not publicize or we do not sort of have a propaganda regarding charities, what we do. The charities are both towards our brethren who are in the organization and then to the community as a whole. The other concepts, there are degrees in Freemasonry which induct a candidate into Freemasonry. It has to be sort of guaranteed or proposed by one brother, seconded by other brother to gain admission into Freemasonry. And Freemasonry has different centers in Western India and other parts of the country. Nagpur being a very vibrant center of Freemasonry has 16 lodges, and most of the lodges have a minimum strength of 40 to 50. Our lodge, which we are talking about, Vasundhara Lodge Vasundhara, is a very small organization which was sort of consecrated or made in 2022 June, and we have only 18 members, which with our strength is very low, but in the years to come we will push it up to 30 or 35. And the region's head is the regional Grand Master. We have our yearly meetings in 2 different centers of Western India. Similarly, all the other regions have their yearly meetings where officers to do the work are appointed.
So hey guys, I am with you right now, your host RJ Krishna. आप मुझे अक्सर सुबह तो सुनते ही हैं, लेकिन आप ऐसी भी मुलाकातें कई बार मेरे साथ देखते हैं जहाँ पे I bring to you those people who done wonders into their life. And कुछ लोग ऐसे होते हैं ना जो बहुत ज़्यादा selflessly काम करना चाहते हैं, और उनमें से एक होते हैं doctors. I have a family which is made of all the doctors, so I know how hard the struggle is. कभी भी कॉल आएगा, कभी भी आपको जागना पड़ेगा, and you just have one thing in the mind, that's always save your patient's life because that's important. लेकिन आज मेरे साथ जो यहाँ शख्स है, इनके नाम सुनने के बाद मुझे लगा कि is he the person जो वाकई डॉक्टर है, या ये मुझे कार्टून नेटवर्क पे ले जाने वाला है, because his name is Tom, and I was Jerry in the house. But then now I got to know that this Mr. Tom has been doing wonders, because not only is just a doctor, but a person who's done more than 700 surgeries. That's an amazing number. हम किसी एक चीज को इतनी बार रिपीटेडली करने के बाद भी शायद थक जाते हैं, और यहाँ ये स्कोर दिन में दिन बढ़ते जा रहे हैं. So Dr. Tom, what really motivated you to become a doctor in the first place?
My father was a cardiothoracic surgeon, and funnily enough, even when I was a child, my friends wanted to become police officers, my friends wanted to become firemen and pilots, but I only wanted to become a surgeon. And even most medical students are not clear as to whether they want to be a radiologist or whether they want to be a dermatologist or whether a surgeon. But I joined medical college to become a surgeon. So I think somehow it's sort of, I've been watching him maybe years past on.
Oh, that's interesting. But you've actually called yourself as one of those persons who were the pioneers now, I could say, for the liver transplants in India. So when you talk about such a thing called as liver, you people actually have those Bollywood movies coming up into their mind and say, oh my god, an alcoholic person must be having so much of a troubles and now he's going to the hospital getting himself in order. But what are the basic myths about it? That who actually has certain kind of symptoms which are associated with liver, and what are the symptoms when your body tells you?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I personally feel a great sympathy for a liver patient, because the minute you have liver disease, they have branded or painted with the alcoholic symbol. The truth is, I have done a transplant on a 9-month-old child. I have done at least 15% of our transplants are for children below the age of 10. So it's not possible
Then they are drinking.
that they are drinking. The second point is, even among the adults, the remaining 85% of liver disease patients, only 30 patients or 35% of those patients have an alcoholic habit or abuse alcohol. Yesterday we had a clinic where we had about 20 patients between the ages of, I think the youngest one was 4 years old and the oldest one was 74 years old. And I believe there's not more than 4 patients in that entire group that have suffered liver disease because of alcohol. So that's the first myth, that alcohol is the root cause of all liver disease. And I have a strong problem with that, because if you're going to be branded an alcoholic, when you have jaundice or when you have liver symptoms, you're going to keep quiet about it until you can. And that lands these patients in hospital far later than they should.
Absolutely.
Even families don't want liver problems to be talked about because of this branding, or what I would call a false assumption that most liver disease is alcohol based.
So what basically causes the diseases, right?
So,
It's mostly nowadays, like when you see that there is a very young section of people or the age group which is affected medically. And mostly it's because of the work balance which they are not able to maintain in their life, which is supposed to be. And the working lifestyle we've right now distorted. So what do you really think is causing these issues? And as small as the kids, as you say, it's just been 9 months.
So, I think the current lifestyle, the pressures on youngsters does lead to stress. And stress is a mental condition that requires relief. And some people take relief in alcohol, some people take relief in shopping, others in, let's say, eating. And the stress of the work can lead to unsociable hours, therefore you don't have time for normal play or exercise, and therefore you have an unbalanced lifestyle that you see. And that's definitely contributing. But there is no direct effect between stress and liver disease. So, if we look at our country, I would have thought, like I said before, 30% or maybe 35% of liver disease currently in our country is due to alcohol.
Right.
The next biggest group, I guess, is fatty liver disease.
Okay.
Fatty liver disease is definitely the elephant in the room and must be mentioned, because we have certain genes, the South Asian population, that predisposes us to a fatty liver disease that is at a higher rate than in the West. So a white Caucasian male will need to have a BMI of 35 before they have serious fatty liver disease. Whereas we could be thin with a BMI of 26 and still have fatty liver disease. So we are genetically predisposed to fatty liver disease. Secondly, we have a diet that is rich, and as you know,
Food speaks it all.
yes, many of our functions revolve around food, and therefore there is a lot of consumption. And at the other end of the spectrum, we don't exercise half as much as we should, and we don't really realize that we are all beautifully made, superbly efficient machines, and we don't need much fuel to work, and therefore we are all consuming far in excess of what we really need to go through a day's job or work.
So you are actually stopping instead of eating right now by saying so.
I think the key is not stopping eating, but changing your habits to seriously reducing quantity and then judging your balance between vegetables and meats and protein and fiber, so that we are not stuck at a place where there is an overload of carbohydrates, and that's where the problem is happening.
It's like when we talk about a typical Indian food, be it any region, we actually do not have a proper way of telling us what food is going to be impacting what on us. And since the COVID hit us, we've seen lots of changes because there's one batch of people who's become very health conscious after the COVID came down into our lives, because they realized if we do not work out, we cannot be living now. And there was one set of the people where you reason says like, now even the COVID is gone, so there was nothing now which is going to be taking more fuel than that. So we can continue eating that perhaps. So when you talk about an absolute perfect food to be consumed and the fuel which is required is not much as we take in, what do you actually would love to suggest? What kind of a food impacts what on the liver?
So the way God created Earth is made for balance, and therefore I think the key is moderation in quantity. So for example, there are certain vegetables that have got vitamins that certain other vegetables don't have.
Right.
There are certain things in meats that vegetables don't have. So the key, like I said before, was smaller quantities of a wide variety. That being said, there are certain foods. Typical example is rice. That's got very little nutritional content of value other than carbohydrates.
Right.
And carbohydrate is not what we need much of. So that is something that we should avoid, and you'll be amazed at how much rice permeates every dish almost, especially in South India. So you make an idli, it's made of rice. You make a dosa, it's made of rice, and then you have rice for lunch, and then you have rice for dinner.
And we have a curd rice to top it.
And so I think this is the problem. And so there are beautiful alternatives like ragi and millet that has got smaller amounts of carbohydrates, maybe a little bit of protein, and lots of fiber, which would be useful. There was a couple of years ago, a magazine called The Time that had on its cover the white devils.
Oh.
And so the three white devils mentioned was sugar, maida or refined flour, and sugar. So I think these are the three things that we need to absolutely watch out for. And in addition to that, have a good bunch of vegetables. The fresher they are or the less cooked they are, the more likely those nutrients are going to survive the process. And a little bit of carbohydrates and a good amount of protein, I think.
So when you talk about transplantations, we have that typical image of people coming across the rooms, being said that, are you fit enough or not? Are you healthy enough or not? But when you talk about a liver transplant, where and who can actually be the donor at that time, who can actually save another person's life? Because many times we have a misconception of also not donating our organs even after the death, because we have a fear of some of our own religions or what's maybe. So who can actually be a perfect donor and how can that really help people?
So there are two types of donors in the world if you divide them into two. One is a cadaver donor who, due to a catastrophe due to bleeding or a road traffic accident, the brain is not working anymore. And the brain stem, which is the one that controls your breathing. So if your brain stem is switched off, you don't breathe. And therefore when your brain stem is switched off, effectively you will die unless there is a machine breathing for you. So that's what's called brainstem death. And people from brainstem death are the ones who contribute this cohort called cadaveric donors. In India, due to our high rate of death from road traffic accidents, we have enough cadaveric donors to supply every person in India with liver disease and organ. Yet, the tragedy of our country today is that 75% of the transplants that I do are from living donors, which is the second cohort, which are people related to the patient by law. In India, unrelated donors are not allowed, and I think that's the right way to be, because the great danger in organ donation is organ trafficking, and if you allow unrelated donors, there is a possibility of trafficking creeping in even without us doctors knowing about it. And therefore, this cohort is mostly related donors, either a wife or a husband or a son or a daughter or a brother or a sister, donating to the recipient who needs the liver, who has had the liver failure. So, from a technical point, surgical point of view, a living donor is far more complex for us as a surgical team, because we have to make sure that the liver is divided into two in a way that both halves work perfectly. Because obviously the liver inside the donor needs to continue to work.
Work too, I guess.
Otherwise we won't be very popular. And obviously the recipient who's getting the liver, it has to work very well too. And that's sometimes a challenge, because God made the liver as a single organ, although it has a left and a right lobe, which is what allows us to take these organs out. The liver has got an amazing regenerative capacity that is, I think, greater than almost any other solid organ, and therefore even if we take out 60 or 65% of the donor liver, within 6 to 8 weeks, 90% of that liver has grown back. In fact, when I was in King's College London, we did experiments with mice, and we have taken out livers, 90% of the mice liver, put the mice back in the cage. In 2 weeks back, 100% has grown back. We have done the experiment again, 2 weeks back, 2 weeks later, 100%. We have done it 15 times, 16 times in the same mice, and it happens every time. In the human body, it doesn't go back to 100% because we are far more complex. We are far more higher than a mice, and therefore we have auto mechanisms that slow down growth when our requirement is met, and that slows down the liver growth. So we don't reach 100% but about 90% within 6 weeks. Isn't that amazing?
Actually amazing, and now that reminds me, you found your journey.
My journey?
So you actually
and I made him pay.
And you paid the price every time. But perhaps that journey has helped you out to actually experiment on us, like it. I showed that one kind of believer is going to be there. So with a beautiful journey of yours, has there been any moment where you were actually taken aback, or you had a kind of a nervousness inside you while operating or while doing the surgery that now what is going to happen? You had a heart which was beating faster, but a mind was telling you that you can really perform this well, Dr. Tom. Just go for it. Has there been any moment where you did that?
You'd be maybe surprised and a little bit worried to know that every transplant is different. And no matter how many anatomy books you have read, there are arteries that are not where it should be. There are vessels right behind where we thought there is nothing. And therefore almost every transplant I go in thinking, my words, I better be careful. I don't know what I'm going to find. We have amazing resolution in nowadays CT scans and MRIs. But believe me, the number of times, even today, that we go in and find something that is unexpected. So maybe 4 days ago, we did a living donor transplant in Vijayawada. And we saw on the MRI and the CT scan that the bile duct was here and the hepatic artery was here. So that's not unusual. So we thought this is normal. But when we went in, we found out that this hepatic artery is stuck to the bile duct far more vigorously than normal. Must have been because there would have been a small amount of inflammation or an infection sometime in the donor's past. But as you know, a CT scan is a 3-dimensional or even a 2-dimensional image, and therefore that does not tell you that there was inflammation before or it is tightly stuck or not tightly stuck. And so this is a 2 mm vessel and a 1 mm thick wall, and therefore if I dissect it a little bit too hard, I have destroyed that artery, and then there is no inflow into that artery, into that graft. So I think in answer to your question,
Yeah, I think
I go into
the
every
precision
operation.
now being into point MMs also going to be there perhaps in your hand.
So this 2 mm vessel will have a 1 mm lumen. So if for example this is 2 vessels and it is sort of 50% mismatched, then your 1 mm diameter lumen comes down to a 0.5 mm, and that reduces flow by more than 70%. And that's not good enough.
You're absolutely not. I think that's not good in the imagination also for me right now. So I don't think that should be okay. But now when you learn to the city of oranges and to the central of India, you have some expectations from us also that we're going to be there serving you at the best and telling that we are not having this fatty liver for you. Or like you have certain things into your mind and you say that I am here because of good purpose and I know what you are good at. So what's the vision behind here?
So I think central India is particularly badly served in terms of liver services. I mean, you walk around Nagpur or even Mumbai and you will see 200 plus, maybe in Mumbai 400 cardiac centers that provide superb services for people with heart disease. But you tell me, how many liver centers have you seen?
I don't remember.
I don't think there are any. And I can go further and say, how many pubs and clubs do you see?
Oh, that's every time 10 meters down the road nowadays.
So I believe that every pub should be asked to build a liver center on top of it.
Oh, that's a good idea. I hope all the Marwadis and the classes listen to this.
Jokes apart, what I feel is liver disease, indeed even transplantation is a relatively new field, and therefore there are not that many centers that provide what I call holistic care, which provides everything from medical treatment to radiological control to surgical resection up to transplantation. And that's very important because if you have this entire armamentarium of treatment, then you're likely to advise the perfect treatment for that particular patient rather than hitting a mosquito with an anti-aircraft missile. So I think that's very important, and that's why I feel that we have South Asian Liver Institute is a pure liver center, and we have associated with Bokar hospitals in Maharashtra, and we are hoping to provide these holistic centers that deal with everything from prevention to transplantation in terms of liver disease. So I think the public, which you were asking about, has got a role to play in this as well. I think we all have a responsibility to our own families, because whether I like it or not, I think my family would struggle to survive if I was not around. And we must all have that sense of responsibility, whether it is alcohol that we're consuming or jalebis that we're eating at Diwali, and keep to moderation and be aware that these are things that can cause permanent damage. So that's one aspect. Other aspect of it is find out about what can be done to prevent things. For example, hepatitis B vaccination. I think every adult in this country must be vaccinated against hepatitis B. There is no good reason why you shouldn't be. It's the same cost as a coffee in Starbucks. And therefore, there is no real reason why you shouldn't be vaccinated. And the third thing is, I believe the medical fraternity have a duty to make sure that a patient who's got liver disease is referred to a good quality center where all treatment options are made available. There is a very big industrialist who comes from Vidarbha. He was diagnosed to have a liver cancer at the age of 68. Oh no, 64. Very well-to-do man, therefore he had a lot of resource to advise. And he's been to at least 3 or 4 hospitals in Nagpur, and he was given treatment what I consider to be palliative, which is chemoembolization of the liver.
Right.
It's not bad treatment, but it doesn't cure. Then he went to Hyderabad. I told you he had a lot of resources. And he went to 3 or 4 excellent hospitals there. And even there, he had one more session of the same therapy. So this has now taken this man's 2 years, and he has reached a point where the tumors are multiplied and those palliative options are almost closed. When I saw him in Nagpur, and I noticed that his left lobe was absolutely normal.
Okay.
So if the left lobe is normal, then I'm thinking, why not remove the right lobe? And you'll be left with the left lobe and there is more than enough. And this is a very simple issue in liver surgery. But the reason why this man had escaped this suggestion was that people assumed that his entire liver is spoiled. And nobody had paid attention to the different parts of the liver. And within 6 weeks or maybe 4 weeks of us seeing him, he's had a curative operation. And yesterday he saw me in clinic for follow-up, and histology confirms that he is absolutely cured with not even lymph node disease, which means that he is likely to die of any other disease like you and me.
Except the liver. Amazing. So guys, now you really need to understand these 3 pointers, what has been saying, that your food plays a very important role in what you do. Your stress level really plays an important role in what you decide. And the most important thing is you need to be healthy enough, and you need to listen to what your body says to you every time it comes down there. So absolutely, this was me with Dr. Tom. Thank you so much guys for watching us out here. And I hope with that, you're going to be healthy and not eating more as he suggested, which is the time you need to get into the liver. Alright guys, this beautiful liver discussion was with association to an initiative by Vasundhara and Think Basically for you. And I hope you really enjoyed the conversation. You're going to be more healthy now and more taking care of yourself.